PDX Real, community engaged reporting, authentic and unapologetic. We tell you what the news isn't reporting and the politicians don't want you to know. Perhaps you've already noticed that our governing needs your attention. Join the conversation. Find us in both long and short format at these channels. Hello, Portland. I'm Angela from PDX Real, and I'm here with somebody that I'm guessing doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give it to you anyway in case you've been living underneath a rock. I have next to me Miss Betsy Johnson, former senator for the state legislature and also a gubernatorial, I have a hard time with that word, candidate running as an independent. And Betsy, something I like people to know about you, because we're very nonpartisan at PDX Real. We have people from all over, non-affiliated, libertarians, Republicans, Democrats. And I like to tell people that you've actually been a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent.
That's all correct. And you just touched on one of the points that I think needs to be brought to bear. Homelessness and the deterioration of Portland is not a partisan problem. And we have, in many respects, turned it into a partisan problem. I'll bet if you walked down the street and peeked in a few tent flaps and said, you know, is this Republican problem? Is this a Democrat problem? They're going to say, no, it's a damn problem and I need to be off the streets. And we got to get the politics out of it.
I love that. I love that. And it's just like a perfect segue, because one of the things that you and I have been talking about, and because you're still, it's so funny, every time I talk to you, you are still working. You're almost more busy, I think, than you were as a senator.
I am, because I don't have to be down in Salem sitting in these butt-numbing meetings hour after hour after hour. I can pick and choose what fights to take my dog to. And it has allowed me to focus with much more clarity on some of the things that I think need to happen. I'm not also in the crucible of the politics.
Right.
And I think politics has brought us literally to the brink. And we got to knock it off. Collectively, we've got to knock it off. When you consider that we've got more money sloshing around in the system than we've ever had, and the number of homeless people is rising at a pretty alarming rate, we're clearly doing something wrong. And instead of pointing finger and assigning blame, I would ask the leadership of the city and the county to sit down and make peace with each other, and then go to the governor and say, you need to back off of this housing first model, because it is increasingly being repudiated. And we need to figure out there's room for all models in this, and whatever works best for the particular cohort of people ought to be what we fund.
Yeah, so right now as we sit here and we're talking on this sofa, there are several things that are going on right now live within our state, city, and county that I think are going to start changing maybe the way we've been seeing things. We have this week, within the week, they're going to be, well, they just announced the terms of the settlement of the ADA lawsuit. Correct. It's pretty thick. You brought it. And so there's some terms about that, about cleanup and reporting and how quickly things need to be done. Priority, more money going to rapid response. We're really changing the fact that there's camping going on. We also have the mayor within the last 48 hours of Portland for people who aren't sure, there's the Joint Office of Homeless Services. And joint office means that the county and city come together with funds to fund that. But the agreement was put together as the county sort of is the one that manages all the money. The agreement was not in the city's best interest. It probably wasn't a really good agreement to enter into. And so the mayor has told the county, I need $20 million for what our plans are for these, I'm sorry, safe rest villages.
Right.
And if not, I'm going to be cutting you from the $43 million that we give you annually. So he's starting to look at pressure points. I do happen to know, too, that this Joint Office of Homeless Services contract, to absolve it, to sort of put it to bed, it would cost the city about $200,000. So to do a dissolution, I think is what they call it. So anyway, we've got that moving. And then we have the recent news with Bybee Lakes, which was formerly Wapato. That has been, toured there actually more than once. I've talked to people that they've helped, that have 70% of their people are working, and they continue to not get money from these programs. And so all these things are moving together in the news circles and the people being aware, and you're involved in a lot of these things, talking to people. I feel like you're sort of, I feel like you're like one of the matriarchs of Oregon. Like,
I'm old
you
enough
guys,
to be a matriarch.
Stop. Let's, you know.
Well, you left out one other very important factor, and that is that the joint office now has a new director, Dan Field.
Yes.
And I know Dan Field from other lives. When I was a senator and a negotiator on what's euphemistically called the provider tax, he was in the healthcare space. And so we know each other from that negotiation. I'd like to believe that I was helpful to his interests. I called him when he was first appointed. I have not gotten a call back. I was on Straight Talk with Laura Porter's show. She wasn't there when we filmed it. But I reiterated on Channel 8 that I want Mr. Field to call me. I don't know whether or not this problem has been lifted up to him in an unbiased way, but it is completely probable, if possible, if not probable, that with all this new money sloshing around, the $200 million that the legislature's already passed, $300 million more that the governor wants, that we could be shutting down programs with a track record, a 2-decade-long track record, while we're starting up new ones. It, to me, borders on criminal that in the fight to decide whose methodology to service the unhoused is the premier methodology, the number of people that are on the streets has risen at a substantial amount, and we're not seeming to make any progress in getting folks housed.
Yeah, I think I want to say this now just to get it out of the way. This Housing First initiative, this idea that you first need to house people so that they are secure, and then you can work on perhaps their mental health or their drug addiction. I can tell you in real life in East Portland, absolutely is not working. Like we know of so many stories in these homes, fires, trash, people having mental health episodes. It's not working. And it's actually people who have gotten into sobriety. It's not a safe place for them to be. It's hard for them. It's not safe for the other residents. And also, this is a national statistic, but people that are housed that are drug addicted are more likely to overdose. I suppose because they're just in their room and...
Well, and for me, it's a very personal issue. I've learned a very difficult lesson in the last 6 months. When my gubernatorial candidacy office was in downtown Portland, I was introduced to a woman who'd been living in a doorway.
Yeah.
And to make a long story very short, I set out to try to get her housed and helped. And it has been a 6-month slog to try to find a place where she fits, to get her proper documents. She had no birth certificate. She had no foundational documents. She had no money. And the problem that exists there is that it isn't just put somebody in an apartment and hope for the best. In this particular instance, the woman I was trying to help needed a navigator and an advocate. And I probably emerged as a pretty uber advocate because I knew my way around the system.
Yeah.
But it's still been incredibly difficult. So it'll be...
So after over 20 years in public service, right, you're able to a lot of times just call people that are over bureaus and like ask them questions and say, can I get somebody to call? Can I get a director here? And it has been hard for you.
I'll be honest, they don't answer as quickly as when I was a senator and had the state's budget in my back pocket. But they...
You call Betsy Johnson back.
But they do answer.
Yeah.
But it has been exceedingly difficult. And I know my way around. If someone is drug addicted or mentally ill and trying to fend for themselves, the first tranche of documents that we got for this woman that I'm trying to help were stolen. And so we started all over again. And I've discovered all kinds of things. We are part of the problem, we being the law. You cannot buy prepared foods with food stamps. You can buy all the fixings for a ham and cheese sandwich, but where do you store it if you're on the streets? Where do you put the bread? Where do you put the ham? Where do you put the cheese? Where's the knife? And instead to go into a little shop and buy a prepared sandwich. You can't do that
with the trail card. Yeah, you can't have hot food with some of the programs. Yeah.
And just getting ID. I got into a big tussle with Vital Statistics up in Washington. I'd done enough research that I actually knew where this woman I was trying to help was baptized. And working with the parish, I tried to convince the priest that the two of us could make a case that a baptismal certificate was a government document. I'm here to say I lost that fight, and I lost it big time. But we finally got her ID.
Yeah.
And the state of Oregon was helpful in doing that. When I first approached the Office of Vital Statistics, I chased the woman around, got her to sign the paperwork, sent it up there, attached a cashier's check, and I didn't get the ID. So I called them and I said, you didn't send me the ID that I requested. And their response to me was, you didn't submit proper ID. Well, you damn fools, the reason I'm negotiating with you is to get the ID.
Yeah, you're like interfacing with the programs that, it's an eye-opening. I was happy when I heard this story that you told me about interfacing, because we've had here in East County, I mean personally, my neighbors and I have worked with a couple people. It's pretty common that they don't have ID, actually.
Yeah.
Usually it gets stolen with their stuff at some point. And we were getting a gentleman, Paul, his ID in California, and I remember how much work we went to get it. And then, lo and behold, next time I saw him, he didn't have his ID again. Like somebody stole. It was just incredible, like trying to get, that helps you get a job, that helps you get...
It's foundational.
It's foundational.
If you don't have a birth certificate that is the trigger to get an Oregon ID, you don't qualify for anything.
Right.
And so we have thrown up all of these barriers. It's going to be interesting to see how some of these housing first models that are now increasingly repudiated turn out. When I was still in the legislature, we were working on a thing called Project Turnkey. I was very suspicious of how that was going to work, because these were not-for-profits taking over dilapidated physical plants. Not all of them dilapidated, but a lot of them. Motels.
Run-down hotels.
They were paying premium prices, as best I could tell, and then needed to convert what was transient lodging, like just an overnight hotel room, into permanent habitation, which meant you had to have ADA, you had to have a kitchen, and I don't believe, nor was I convinced before I left the Senate, that some of these not-for-profits had the wherewithal to do that conversion. And how deep was the inspection? They had to put an ADA elevator in, and how much did that cost? And I don't think all of those facilities, despite heroic efforts on the part of the Oregon Community Foundation and others, are going to be able to deliver a sustainable model.
Betsy, one of the things that I keep thinking, the more that I go down this rabbit hole, and you're down this rabbit hole longer than I have been, but the more I see something really broken in the state at like so many levels. It's just infuriating. And I also see that there's, the mayor's responsible for these things with city council, and the county is responsible. So the cities, just to back up for people, you've got water and parks and the roads and building permits, etc. And then you move over to the county and you've got mental health and you've got shelter and you've got human services. And the city, because the homeless issue is so large, they're starting to, get grants federally, and then they have some money coming from different places, legislature, the governor through that. A lot of people are trying to resolve this. And then you have the state legislature, looking at passing things. But you have a lot of people who are like, well, I can't do that. That involves this person. There's a lot of that. The only thing that I feel, and all the things that I've seen that we can do to resolve this, is talk about it and be honest about how broken it is.
I completely agree. To give you just an example of how broken it is, in my attempts to help this woman that I just spoke of, there was a little coffee shop downtown, and they have been heroic in helping. And they called the other day, and they had a young kid that said, I want to come in off the streets. And so Helping Hands was dispatched and picked him up. But the point that I'm trying to make here is you have a coffee shop owner who's had her place broken into a couple of times, calling a retired senator to say this kid needs help.
Yeah.
That for me is Exhibit A in a broken system.
Yeah, completely agree. We had somebody that we've tried to get into treatment, meaning Hooper or Fora that used to be DePaul. 3 different times. You have to line up at 7:30 in the morning. They choose if they say yes that day. Before that, we waited in line, found out we had to get her on Oregon Health Plan. There was an ID problem. It's just this ongoing thing. In the meantime, her legs are super swelled up from the fentanyl, and she swears she wants to get off of it. We've taken her to Bybee. She had a kind of a panic moment, which sometimes happens. It's been really hard, and sometimes she'll ask for help. Okay, I'm ready, and it's 8:00 at night, and we have no place to take her.
That's exactly.
And I'm
correct.
like, how do we not have a shelter that we can take somebody who wants to go and hold them from morning to go into detox? Like, it's just it's so upsetting, and I feel as though in the meantime, and I'm just using one example of a person who I'm talking about, but with her, we'll see her around in our neighborhood and talk with her again, or she'll show up or call us, and I worry that she's going to die before we get our act together. And there are thousands of people out there that are addicted to drugs. To meth and fentanyl is the typical thing right now. And now we have Trank. I'm 100% sure it's here in Portland, and it's probably going to grow. And it's just it's really sick.
But let's segue off of what you just said, because you've touched on something that is foundational to fixing this problem, and that's ballot measure 110. We have caused our streets to be awash in a cornucopia of drugs.
Yes.
And as long as the drug proliferation continues and there is no stick to get somebody into treatment, we're going to continue to have ODs, and we're going to continue to have a proliferation of people making a living off the misery of the streets selling drugs. I have joined with a group of like-minded folks, and you just shared with me that there may be others over in Bend that I want to get a hold of to make common cause. And we have got to do something to fix this. Now, interestingly enough for me, I was privy to a poll that said there are people that are interested in reforming rather than repealing, because it still strikes a chord with Oregonians that we want to get help for people. But I think the taxpayers and the people that are served and public servants need to know that there's efficacy in the treatment programs, and that we're not just measuring throughput, but outcomes. I don't care that you answered the phone 400 times. I want to know, out of that 400 engagements, how many people went into treatment. Were they sober for 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years?
And they're not tracking that. What's the outcome? We're not tracking that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, not at all. And any other investment of the magnitude that we've been talking about, you track your return on investment. We have no way of knowing. And we have taken away the stick of having drug courts or mental health courts or some of the rest of that sort of stuff that the judicial system could employ to motivate people to seek treatment. Yeah. Now, not only do we not have that motivation, but we've got the city with passing out clean needles and doing, I forget what they call it. There's
enablement.
But there's some fancy name for it. Harm reduction. Yep. Harm reduction. Yeah. What a crock.
Well, and harm reduction has gone from we don't want people to have hepatitis and HIV to now you can get fentanyl and pipes from them. It's like, what? You're going to give me a pipe? How is that harm reduction? That's just helping me get high.
Well, at the point where
tax dollars.
At the point where they have an Angela or a Betsy out trying to do our own interventions because the system is so broken.
Yeah.
That ought to be a clarion call to our leaders to say, we elected you, we have confidence that you can show the requisite leadership, and you can bring this together. We've got to step back and stop letting personalities and politics dictate the outcomes. And I'm hopeful now with Julia Brim Edwards joining the county commission and Jessica Vega Peterson in a position to show real leadership. And let's try to mend the bad feelings between the city and the county. They have a forced symbiotic relationship, and they've got to not be picking at each other. I believe the mayor is in a position where he wants to try to broker peace, but what this whole thing is looking for is honest to God leadership Who steps forward and says, I don't care whose idea it is, there could be more than one methodology. Let's help everybody in the spectrum of healing. And let's figure out those things that we need, like a safe room or a respite for somebody who decides they want to quit using fentanyl at 8 o'clock at night. And we're telling them, go get high and wait until morning when you can go stand in line with your swollen edema legs.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe, like, one day they were like, well, sometimes we have people camp out front, just have her camp out front. And I was like, you want a woman? I realize she's outside anyway, but it's like, I get really concerned about women's safety out there.
So do I.
I mean, it's just...
and how discouraging is it for somebody to finally come to terms with the demon of drugs and to say, I'm ready to quit, I'm holding out my hand for help, and we say, stand in line or stay all night, and maybe you get in tomorrow, and maybe you don't. How many times does that happen?
Just keep showing up. And to get somebody who's an addict before 7:30 in the morning, it's not easy. Yeah, I mean... It's really difficult.
So I remain an optimist that with proper public encouragement and this kind of open, honest dialogue, I hope brings that public encouragement, that the public can say it is our expectation that our leaders get together and figure out how to make common cause, because the goal here is to get people off the streets, get people the help they need, restore Portland to its old luster, make downtown a safe, inviting place. Everything works better if we can get the leadership. And I count the governor in that too. The governor has been wedded to this notion of housing first. I am told that one of her staff went out to Bybee Lakes and was showing around and then announced, don't even ask for any of this $200 million because you're not going to get it because your model isn't our model. I am, as an Oregonian and a taxpayer and a human, I am so offended by that.
It's just, results are results. I mean, there's staff there. There's one gentleman I'm thinking of, he was able to get clean and sober. He ended up getting a job. 70% of the people at Bybee are working. And they have skin in the game. They feel like they're productive. It's good. They teach them cooking classes, etc. Anyway, he works there now. And last time I saw him, he was like, I'm buying a house. And it was so beautiful, and we were just talking about that, and he was like, I never knew I could get here.
Yeah, and God bless him. I mean, that almost brings tears to your eyes.
Yeah, it totally does.
And I've been talking to a company called Path House that is building modular houses out of cross-laminated timber. There's room out at Bybee that they could actually start producing some of those or have them. So you come in addicted, lost, homeless, and you could leave with home ownership. That's a success story. And that's what we all ought to celebrate and encourage. But
uplift people, not leave them where they are. Yeah.
Because you're fighting politically or you're letting personalities get in the way.
So, Betsy, one thing I'd like to ask you is, we have people that follow us and watch our content that are from all kinds of different places. So, we've got people in emergency services, people who work for the city and the county, actually. We've got, fire and emergency. We have people that are business owners, people that are stay-at-home moms, all different ages. And so for an average person who's watching and starting to understand what's going on, and that's my hope, what they've been doing, learning what's going on and getting involved in civic affairs. We talk about that a lot. What are some things that, with the issues that we're talking about right now, what can the average person do to help move the needle?
Well, let me drop back and answer a question you didn't ask, or at least speak to something you didn't ask.
Okay.
And that is, your programming has grown exponentially in viewers. That tells me that people are hungry for authentic content and authentic conversations about how do I make it better.
Right.
And so I want to congratulate you on the really heroic effort that you've made to peel back the onion. And I at least want to use this as an opportunity to say you've been pretty much doing this out of your own pocket up to this point. And if people appreciate the kind of content that you continue to put out and the uplift that you continue to give some of these problems in Portland and in Oregon, they might want to think about making a financial contribution. You've done this at considerable personal sacrifice. So
Thank you, Betsy. And coming from you, I look up to you so much, so thank you.
Well, having said that, then to answer your question is, everybody has the ability to do something. Whether it is to write letters to the editor, whether it is to call your elected officials at whatever level, the city level, the county level, the state level, the governor's office. I frankly think encouraging our congressional delegation to take a little ownership role here, because what happens to their constituents in Oregon matters. They're here to represent us, albeit at the federal level, but they need to own a piece of the fact that Portland's a mess. And so writing a letter, showing up at a hearing. I don't know what's going to happen at the legislature right now. They're at somewhat of a stalemate. The session may or may not end in a successful session. If it fails, there will be a budget session, and hopefully the legislature will accommodate testimony in the building for people to come down and comment on the budgets. One of the things that I've been particularly annoyed at is the lack of the public to participate, the ability of the public to participate. The building is a construction zone. You've got to go through all these levels of security. This is not the state capitol that I knew as a little kid when my father served there. I went in the building the other day, and you know, they want to have you empty your pockets, and I'm not flying to Istanbul. I want to go upstairs and talk to somebody who's expecting me. Anyway, so I've been kind of miffed at the fact that it's been so difficult for
It doesn't
people.
feel like the people's house
Oh
anymore.
God, no! Oh God, no! It doesn't feel like.
It feels like you're, yeah.
Like you feel like you're insinuating yourself into some private club, and
that's what I think is wrong. Like
I think it's dead wrong.
It is our government.
Yep.
It is,
Yep.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So many legislators, I know I did this during the 2 decades that I was in the legislature, hold town halls. You can show up at those town halls. You can call the offices, and the little known secret is that all the House offices are 986-14 and the district number, and all the Senate offices are 986-17 and the district number. So they all start with 503, and that's sort of a little not well-known secret. So I represented Senate District 16, so my number was 503-986-1716. And everybody that's listening to this, out of your 70,000 strong audience, they've got a state representative, they've got a senator, they've got a county commissioner, because the county is zoned. And they weigh in.
They have 4 city councilors, a mayor.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, as having been an elected for a long time, nothing is more motivating than a room full of constituents or Oregonians or Portlanders sitting in a city council meeting saying, this is our opinion, this is what we want to be heard on. I know that it is difficult for people who have been participating that way for the last 3 years or more and have not seen the dial move. At some point, they just want to say, screw it. Nobody's listening. I would ask them, in the context of this show and our conversation, redouble your efforts. If good people that are motivated to make Portland and Oregon better give up, we're sunk.
And we've been making progress.
I agree.
We've been making progress, and these things we talked about at the beginning with the stories coming out about Bybee and the ADA lawsuit, and all these in the county and the city, the mayor's sort of saying enough. Those things are because of public pressure. Nobody can tell me differently.
Oh, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
The progress has been glacial, but I believe
glacial, exactly.
In no small measure, it's been motivated by this show, and there are others that are focusing a very tight lens on what's going on. There are people writing in Portland Dissent right now that are calling the question and asking for accountability, and it happens at that level. And eventually, I think we're going to get to a place where leadership acts like leaders and convenes those methodologies that get to a solution. And bear in mind that not everybody is going to get everything they want. The art of compromise has been lost. And we ought to remember that if everybody can give a little bit, the eye on the prize is, let's reclaim our state.
Exactly. And with that, we're going to have Betsy back because we have plenty of things to talk about. And I just want to thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience and help. I hope grow the numbers. And
everybody's been so excited. They knew you were coming on. They were like, "I love Betsy." So yeah, it's great.
Cool. We'll have more conversations because it's a target-rich environment right now.
It
and
is.
The more we talk about it, the more we elevate the problem and we make the clarion call for a solution.
Thank you for being here. You can find us on social channels on Twitter and Instagram and, I don't know, Facebook, all kinds of places. Thank you.